All right, so a very good afternoon, I think, to most people who are listening, and a very good evening to me. And thank you for inviting me to speak about this topic, well or win, the practicing of the psychological self-care of optimizing support and performance in sports and life. Honestly speaking, this presentation is not on athlete, but it's most probably on the coaches and especially for the sports practitioner or the sports psychology practitioner that are in the field. Because I noticed there are not many studies or there are not many emphasis on this as compared to the athletes on the field. Okay, so just kindly allow me to introduce myself. My name is Phillip. I'm currently working in the National Sports Institute of Malaysia. So my current role is providing services to this is the sailing team during the Olympics, and also providing as a sports science team leader for the upcoming Commonwealth Games, preparing the long bowls teams towards the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, and also as a presenter, educator, and of course as a researcher, author, and reviewer. We just wrote a few papers on the impact of psychological in the COVID-19 and also the mental health of athletes. So technically, this is my role with the National Sports Institute. And of course, most of my time, I have the opportunity to work with athletes, all the elite athletes in Malaysia for the past 8 years for the majors, the worlds, the Olympics, of course. And I even have the amazing experience to work with a Guinness World Record holder. So we're preparing him towards aiming his Guinness World Record. So every time when people talk about sports psychology, they were just mentioning about athletes, but they are more than just athletes. Anything that involves performance actually can be categorized and can be used. And a lot of those skills that you have can be used with these athletes. And working with him was amazing because I think that this is a one in a million opportunity to work and to be able to achieve the Guinness World Record with him as well. So this is actually my presentation last year. It's the same, win and or well. It is more for the athletes, but for to this year instead, I'll be emphasizing more about the psychological well-being or the wellness or performance of a sports psychology practitioners in the field. And whenever we talk about sports, I think that it is always good to have that strong and trusted support system to achieve that goal medal target, of course, the goals. And you will see that you have coaching staff, the sports science staff, like where the psychologists, the nutritionists might be, the sports medicine staff, family and friends, and organization. So we can say that always it is more like an athlete-centered approach with the common goals and expectations and interactions. And also you can see that there are lots of ways to achieve the optimal support. And I always like to describe it like a pit stop in an F1 race. And wherever you do, the athlete is like the car in the middle, and your job is to change the tires. And whenever, if let's say one of them miss something or do not perform optimally, that whole car will not work. And that's the same it is. So yes, the athletes is the top priority, but everyone in the whole system is equally important or as important as the psychological well-being in this. And you can see that, for instance, for those that watch the French Open, like when Iga won the French Open Women's Tour, she did mention and she did highlight the importance and impact of having a psychologist with her during the whole tour. So as you can say, as I stated in the start, there were lots and lots of research, especially in the COVID-19, on the athletes' responses, the generic responses of it. But how many of it is on the practitioners' impact, the equal impact of COVID-19 on practitioners? And honestly speaking, there's not many. I can't find any, to be honest. And you can see that this is one of the few papers. This is, I think, is a pre-COVID paper on self-care as a key to others' care, and the perspective of globally situated, experienced senior sports psychology practitioners. And I think that it is so important. We keep emphasizing or we keep mentioning about providing support to the athletes, motivation part, the performance part. But how about us? Are you prepared mentally and physically sufficient to be able to support your athletes? Because at the end of the day, your well-being cares and is so important of your mental well-being as well. And whenever we talk about psychology, I think I always like to use a simple description for it, is that our perception and our expectations towards a particular situation, whether it is positive or negative, will impact on the response that we have. And this is the psychological response that we could see. 3 of the responses that we usually see is the mindset, about how do I think, feeling, how do I feel, and behavior, about how do I act. And this is always been the same. And how do you influence on your mindset, your emotions, and your behavior plays a very important role in how you deal with the situation that arises. And the question that I keep asking people and asking about you is that, do you take good care of you? At the end of the day, it's always good that we keep mentioning about the athletes, the coaches, but how about you as a person? Do you take good care of yourself? And I always like this quote to say that you can't pour from empty cup. You need to be able to take care of yourself first. And hello, I am not just you, I'm important. And to be able to do that is, of course, the most important. During the past 2 years, during the COVID, I know that it is so difficult, especially for those people that keep traveling with athletes towards competitions, preparing athletes for the Olympics, the major games. It is so stressful because of we keep putting people in front, the importance of this. But at the end of the day, do you really take your time, sit back and think about yourself? Are you improving? Enhancing psychological and physically your own psychological well-being? Because for me, I think that it is so much important. And whenever I talk about sports, whenever I deliver lectures, I usually like to use the word care. Like I usually ask the people that, are you able to care in sports and life? Care stands for first, are you able to cope, to manage the situation with calmness and effectively? Are you able to adapt, adjust to the situation and modify approaches? Are you able to respond, like we mentioned earlier, about the situation in a particular manner? And finally, are you able to emphasize about placing the importance and focus on a particular aspect? Are you able to care in the line of work that you do? I know that some of you might be students, some of you might be still in the process doing, but being able to care and to be able to know that what are your boundaries and what you're able to do and to be able to take care of your personal well-being psychologically and physically is so important, especially when you are delivering sports psychology support in high performance sports at a higher level. And these are among the words and questions that you usually ask yourself. I think that this session is not like a research session, but it's much more like an exploratory session. Think about it. How important is your personal well-being? What are your priorities? And what are you willing to commit to achieve that optimal psychological well-being? At the end of the day, it's almost like an athlete. When an athlete is injured, no matter how talented you are, no matter how good you are not able to perform optimally. And it's the same like those sports psychology practitioners that are working with the athletes. Are your personal well-being efficient and optimal to be able to support yourself and also the athletes and the people that you work with? These are 4 elements that I usually will emphasize on when we try to determine and manage our wellness and performance. One is, are you able to know what are the demands in that particular scenario? Like if you are given a job, you're given a task, what are the demands that is required? And now, do you have the resources to be able to execute the demands? Next is, what are the barriers, what are the challenges that you will face in be able to achieve that demand? And finally, what are the strategies that you have that you will use to be able to do it? And I think that this is quite similar like those athletes that you work with, the coaches that you work with, even the psychology practitioners or any of the sports science, sports medicine. You need to be able to have a lot of tools to be able to manage through and to navigate through the challenges and the situations that you will face in your career and also in your role. This is one of the ways that I usually use. Actually, this is an online evaluation of the Brunel Mood Scale. And you can see that while you are filling up, you can actually analyze it based on your own identity and also based on your own psychological well-being, especially in the moods. There were lots and lots of psychometrics on the market that we're able to use. And it's always good sometimes that when you give an athlete to do psychometrics, and do you do it on yourself? Do you really evaluate your own psychological status as well? And this is actually a simple way for you, it's a suggested simple way for you to do it. And you can see that while just doing it online, you're able to get the results out of the way. And you can able to use it as a guideline for you to manage your psychological well-being needs. And this is actually a site mapping that people use it. I think it has been quite new and it's been done by Professor Latinja. That I think that it provides you with an idea about what is going on with yourself and also to be able to know more about yourself. Because at the end of the day, like what I mentioned earlier, you yourself means a lot and you are important. So being able to know more about yourself, it actually helps you to be able to work efficiently with the athletes that you work with as well. And I think that along the phases in my personal psychological monitoring of myself, I usually break it into 4 parts. One is I will have that uncertain phase, like you're unsure about the situations that are occurring. The adaptation phase, like you're trying to familiar with a particular task activity, like when you're starting to work with an athlete, you are starting to know the sports, you're starting to know their periodizations, their plannings. And the loading phase is where you execute a lot of your work. You're traveling with them for competitions, you're educating them, you're doing sessions with them. And finally, I think that it's always good to have this phase as well, the recovery phase, that you have an optimal opportunity to redeal to your ideal state, health, and mind. Because we keep mentioning recovery to the athletes. You need to recover physically, mentally. So do you, as a practitioner, ready to recover as well? Do you take time for yourself as well to be able to recover? And I think that this is a simple emoji about how things looks like. During uncertain phase, you might feel that uncertainty, that anxiousness, and you will feel that excitement when you're in the adaptation phase. Along the way, when you're in that loading phase, you will keep doing, you'll keep working, and until at times, like I still remember when I was starting my career in 2016, 2017, I was only in my hometown, Malaysia, for less than 30 days for the whole year. You keep traveling from competitions to training camps until at the time you lose focus about what you are doing, and your recovery and your physical well-being and mental well-being might be affected as well. And it will definitely affect on the work that you work with the athletes as well. So I think that having that recovery phase and know your boundaries and setting that is of course very, very important, especially during my career. And this is actually what I did for myself during the past 810 days. The start of this is actually at the start of the lockdown in Malaysia, which was on the 18th of March 2020 during the first COVID scenario until now. And you can see that along the way, of course, you will feel energized 70% of the time. But along the way, I still understand that there will be days or there will be moments that I'm feeling kind of like in the negativity, like you're unaware, you are cautious about it. So it is, of course, okay to feel not okay. I think that this is a quote, this is a great quote by Phelps, because you can't be motivated, you can't be confident, and you can't be 100% every single moment of your life. There will be situations in your life, like I was just in the training camp during the Commonwealth Games for the past 30 days in Birmingham. And there will be days that you're unsure about what is going on. You will have their ups and downs. And I think that it is good to be able to accept it, acknowledge it, and to be able to get through it as times, because you can't be motivated 100% of the time. So to be able to know that ups and downs, like the wave, is of course very, very important, especially if those people that are interested to work in that high level of high performance sports. I use this possible framework in my career and also in working with athletes as well. Like the word possible, P stands for preparation. What if this situation occurs? What is your response towards it, and how do you react towards it? Optimization, do you have the resources in making the demands or making the strategies work effectively? S stands for self-reflection. I think that having that reflective practice to be able to reflect on whatever is going on is very, very important about like what is happening. Situation management, how do I manage this situation? I stands for improvement. No matter what you do, I think that it's always good to identify about what are the situations that you can improve during this situation that you have. Bounce back ability, be about resilience. How do I overcome the challenges and setbacks that you face? L stands for lessons learned. What have I learned? And finally is the evaluation. How did I perform? And I think that having this framework actually gives me that structure to be able to evaluate on my own performance as well. I think that people always keep mentioning to me that what are the best psychological skills that you can teach to an athlete, and what are the best psychological skills available in the market? And my answer has always been, there's no the best sports psychological skills, but there will be a skill or technique or approach that is suitable for the individuals that you work with. Working in Malaysia, for those that are interested in working in Malaysia, you'll be working in a multicultural. So technically, most of us can speak close to 6 to 7 languages, because they will be working with people from across all races, across all ethnicity. So everyone is different based on their cultural background. So being able to know what suits them and understand their background will be extremely important to provide the effective skills that you have. And the day is not about how good you are or how skillful you are. It's about how good you are working with the athletes that you work with. That flexibility and to have that structure to be able to assist them is, of course, very, very important. This has always been that scenario that I like to ask people. How many dots are there on the screen? And some people might say 1, some people might say 2. Of course, the answer is 12. But are you able to see all 12 dots at the same time on the same screen? The answer, of course, is difficult. And this is the same way that we send to the analogy of athletes that you work with. It's so difficult for you to try to focus too many things at the same time. But you're able, if let's say you're able to focus on the top right dot, you can do that because you're able to focus on one task at a time. That mindfulness approach to be able to focusing on the now is so important. And I usually use this quote by Oprah Winfrey to say that I've learned that you can't have everything and do everything at the same time. And before I end my presentation, this is actually an example about how I did it. Is that whenever we talk about sports psychology, we talk about it is an art. And the way how I explain about art is, of course, R stands for research, T stands for theories. And there were lots of research and theories in relation to sports psychology. And it's almost like retweeting on Twitter. You keep seeing that people keep retweeting to create that awareness. But at the end of the day, no matter how much the research being done or the theories being done, is it being applied in the field? And is it being applied? Or the simple word that usually people use is the action. What action that is already being done to be able to support the research and theories? Because at the end of the day, it's about the athletes and about us. And the people that are working in the sports are the researchers or the theories being applied to the field effectively. And this is my experience about myself. Like at the start, I was under pressure. I was binge eating and stuff, and it went. My weight went up to nobody's business. It was like close to 125 kg from the start of the lockdown. You do not lose, as I said, it was an uncertain phase that you're not sure about yourself. Eventually, athletes might ask you that what happened to you. And I think that we need to be very comfortable in the sense that we accept what's going on, but we are trying to make sure that we know how to manage and to be able to optimize our mental well-being as well. And along the way, we did improve. Slowly gain pieces by pieces towards 200 days to gain down to 104 kg. And eventually along the way, you can see that you keep mentioning and managing our psychological stress to be able to achieve to the current situation that I'm in, which is close to 88 kg. Of course, we mentioned that, as I said, sports is important, athletes are important, but how about you? Are you managing yourself and are you optimizing your psychological well-being as well? And I use this, we call it the power of the 1%. Some might have heard about it, and I think that is quite an interesting analogy of it, is that how many times have we actually stopped doing something or losing faith because something we are doing do not see the results. We don't see the results. Like for instance, you want to be physically active, but you want to lose weight, but the weighting scale, the numbers on the weighting scale is not reducing, and you keep knowing that there will be distractions such as your work commitment. So I think that having that power of the 1% is so important. Like people always mentioning about power of extra 1% in your effort daily. Put yourself one and you power it by 365 days, you get 1. But let's say you're increasing 1% to your daily day on 365 days, you will get exponential improvement of 37.78. How about, let's say, if you reduce it by 1%, 0.01, then you will get a huge amount of decrease as well to 0.03. So I think that having that success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out consistently. And it's the same like when working with athletes, working for yourself, working with yourself is, of course, the most important. This is an acronym called Help a Person. Are you able to help that person? Encourage, listen, praise, and accept for yourself and also the athletes that you work with. And never underestimate your impacts on other people's life to be able to speak up and support others. I think that is not just with the athlete, even with the practitioners. I have a strong group of support that are able to bounce my ideas on and to be able to support it. I think that having that group is so important. Like sometimes people might ask you like, are you okay? Are you fine? Is there anything that you can do? Because always remember that alone, we can do so little, but together we can achieve so much more. And finally, always remember that you wouldn't let this to happen to your phone. So do not let it happen to you either. And always remember that self-care is a priority. So I think that this ends my presentation for today. Thank you very much. I think that is a bit different because I know that this do not fully understand or do not fully reflect to the athlete. But I think that everything that I mentioned today can be used with an athlete, can be used with their coaches, can be used with anybody in the field, in the society. But most importantly, you need to use it with yourself first to have that optimal psychological and physical well-being. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Philip. It was great. Nice reminder, especially for practitioners to look after themselves. Love that. And I loved all the little quotes. Does anyone have any questions for Philip? Time for a question. Anyone? No? I'll have one question for you, Philip. If you were to give a sport practitioner one piece of advice for self-care, what would it be?
I would say that take good care of yourself, and also to be able to have a group of friends, like for instance, those other practitioners that you will work with. I think that having that at the start of my career is so important. Like you have supervisors, your mentors, to be able to keep reminding you, and because they have been in that process. And as I mentioned in my slide earlier, alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much more. I think that having that support group is very, very important. Of course, I understand that a lot of us might be competing among the same athletes or even in the same games, but to be able to communicate with each other, I think that I even like look through the Twitter's pages of most people. It provides me with that confidence and that support, and I think that is very, very important during my career.
Yeah, brilliant. Completely agree. Especially for sounding boards, like you said, to be able to bounce ideas off of, whether that's research, whether that's as a applied practitioner, etc. So thank you very much for that talk. I think it'll be very useful to the people in the room. So we'll go back into the main room.